Copyright avoiding intro music. Hype did it I, hype did it I, hi did I, die did I, hype did it I, hype did it I, hi die, yeah die did it die, hi ya da did it die, hi ya da did it die. This is Off the Beaten Paths, now available at empaths.com, the Mystical Paths blog. Available in the iTunes podcast directory, meaning you can get it on any podcast app you use, and also available via YouTube, and available at paths.podbean.com. Argument number 5, politics is cray cray. Oil tankers are blowing up, and can I work in Tel Aviv? Hi, Fayga.
Hi.
So, I had an interview yesterday, for those who don't know, and I don't know why you would know. It's not like I share all of my life online, or even most of my life online. My employer closed down, and therefore, obviously, all the employees lost their job. That's one of the negative sides of the startup nation, is while a lot of companies succeed, an unusual percentage of companies succeed, make big money, make taxes, make good jobs for their people. Some people get in the exit and become millionaires, but companies get bought out. Some of their technologies get moved. Some of the people, jobs get moved. Companies close down. Companies don't succeed. They don't continue to get funded, and those jobs are gone. In this interview in Petach Tikva, and one of the things that surprised me a lot as I entered this industrial park, this high-tech industrial park, was this giant billboard for Lieberman.
Okay.
Now, we've started a new election cycle. Hooray. Isn't that exciting? And as I exit this high-tech park, there is this billboard had to be like 5 or 10 times.
Is it like those ones that they do in Jerusalem, like on the hotel, like the long...
Well,
or is it more like wide?
No, this was wide. This was in an intersection, and it was like the width of the intersection. Now, they had ones at the opposite corners, and one was, I guess, for Nike, and another one was for an insurance company, and then there was just this huge picture that just said Lieberman and had his picture.
Do you think it's from this current?
Yes. This was brand new. Oh, it was brand new. It was brand new.
You can still find posters from the most recent election around.
Well, of course, one of the major negatives.
Like when I was in Jerusalem just yesterday, I saw a whole bunch of Shas posters all over, and they weren't just brand new; they were still there from March.
Yeah, well, this is one of the major negative side effects of Israeli elections. Is there's a lot of proliferation of materials, signs, posters everywhere. They're all glued up. Advertisement spaces that are infrequently used are filled. And the stuff stays. Nobody goes and collects it afterwards.
That's true.
So there's a tremendous generation of garbage, unfortunately. And we almost need the years till the next election just to get it all cleaned up.
So true.
But it struck me because the question is, what does this guy think he's doing? I mean, does he think he's the secular savior? Does he think he's going to replace the Kahol v'Lavan, the blue and white party, and become the primary party in Israel because he stopped Netanyahu from forming a government? What in the heck is this mindset?
I don't know. I mean, he put out this little cartoon on his Facebook page sometime this week, and it was Bibi, UTJ, and the United Right Wing parties pulling on a rope, and him on the other side, and he's like, no, we need to be liberal right-wingers, and I'm going to return that. If there's one thing that I've kind of realized is that he has a certain type of communist mindset. I could be wrong. Okay, he's originally from Russia. Okay, and I think he grew up in a time, as a kid at least, with the USSR, and that's his tendency. Is he specifically looking to destroy the right? I don't know. I think he came off as the guy that destroyed the government, the guy that's not going to be happy with anything, the guy who's been in politics for 30 years and hasn't accomplished shitskas.
So there was one other thing that happened while I was in this interview, which was a bit unusual.
Okay.
So I had this interview at this company, and as part of the interview, they provide services to other companies.
Okay.
So they asked me, they looked at me, and I look like a pretty religious fellow, especially by Israeli standards. I show up in the standard black dress slacks and white dress shirt and big black yarmulke. I've also got a big, mostly white, gray beard. No, not gray. What? No, brown beard. No.
Brown, yeah, sure. Haredim men's dyeing salons for beards. I wonder if that could be a business.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Anyway, so I got a mostly white looking beard now. Look kind of rabbinical, at least. Yeah, of course the kids are going to laugh at me like that, but that kind of have that look. I'm not rabbinical, but that's the look I get. And he asked me during the interview.
Mm-hmm.
He said, we have customers in Tel Aviv. And I said, yeah. And he goes, are you all right going to customers in Tel Aviv?
Oh my gosh.
And
I can't.
Now,
even.
People need to understand. Israel's an interesting place. There certainly is quite a difference in culture just driving. I mean,
from city to city, or different even neighborhoods in one city.
It's a 45-minute drive from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, but
two different worlds.
If you step out on the street on Tel Aviv and you step out on the street in Jerusalem, there's significant differences. There's also two sides to Tel Aviv, right?
That's true. One
side's on the beach, and it's tourist, and it's beach, and it's hotels, and it's bars and restaurants. And the other side, I'm actually talking physically.
You're talking about Tzfon Tel Aviv? Excuse me,
Tel
Aviv. I'm sorry.
No, neither. What I'm saying is the side that's on the ocean.
Yeah, it's a nice area.
Okay, is hotel-y and touristy. And, not all of it's touristy. Some of it's for the locals and so forth. But it's beachy.
It's
right?
nicer on a certain level.
And bars and restaurants and so forth.
But Tel Aviv's got a lot of bars. I'm not like a
of course.
Tel Aviv person.
But if you go to the other side, if you go to the side along the Ayalon, along the highway,
yeah.
And then we're talking...
Like where the Google building
is? We're talking
is?
west as a side to east.
Yeah.
If you go to the east side, if you go to Azrieli, which is the three towers and the train stations and so forth, that's office buildings. And that's business. Right?
Market.
Right, the Sarona Market... and so forth. Even if you go to the southern side of the town, which is the poorer area, right, down by the University train station, for example, and you go a few blocks south of that district, there's some quite nasty areas, unpleasant businesses. But even so, that's also where there's a series of bank buildings where they're doing bank processing and other business buildings, on the side of that neighborhood. So there's kind of a business side of Tel Aviv, there's a residential area, and there's a tourist area. To me it was a funny question because, I assume that if I'm walking into offices and doing business, I just don't just assume this. I've been in plenty of offices in the area. Certainly people may be dressed more casual than they are in Jerusalem. They may be in shorts, they may be in sandals, but they're not in bikinis. I'm not going to the beach, I'm going to a professional office. If you're in the high-tech world, people may be like that. But I've also been in government-ish offices, right? Various different government authority offices. And people...
Are you saying, the Tel Aviv mindset's, really changed?
No,
it was just, that sounds really weird.
No, I'm actually saying the opposite. What surprised me at this particular company, this is a company that provides IT services, is... they have a lot more religious people working for them than I've seen in the past. As a matter of fact, I saw a large group of religious software developers, and maybe they've run into some people who have been sent to offices and come back very uncomfortable if they're in an environment that's...
I can understand that, but being that so many religious people working around my gun, then I don't... Okay, listen, there's people that will be uncomfortable because, if you come from certain communities, you're a lot more, the word I'm going to use is sheltered, but it's not the right word.
Well, it is the right word. I mean, if you're coming from Jerusalem, you're unlikely to run into people walking around in a tank top or a halt. What do you call it? What is it when it just has straps? Oh, when a woman wears that,
Like
a halter top. Is that what it? I don't know, but
like
you
a
know,
goofy, yeah.
yeah, I guess. I mean, you're not going to
Like
run
a tank top.
a tank top, like a women. You know, you're not going to run into people walking the streets in that in Jerusalem, or you're rarely going to run into that. Whereas in the streets of Tel Aviv, you might run into that. And in offices, you will see people that, are in Tel Aviv. You may see people that are dressed much more on the questionable edge. Certainly, if you were in the U.S., you would consider it very unprofessional. But
Israel's a whole different culture.
Yeah, I mean,
Israeli professional standards are so different from American professional standards, even for the IT world.
Yes. So, people can run into it, and it could be a surprise if they haven't run into that before. But people are working in a professional office, and profession is profession. If people aren't doing their jobs, if they're not being professional, then, they're not going to do that. Anyway, that was a surprise to me. Now, this company I interviewed at, it was actually kind of interesting. They run the software system that manages.
Oh, that's really cool.
That manages the Israeli elections. So, from their bottom line standpoint, they're quite happy when elections come along.
But they just let their people go, no?
Well, it's a 6-month project effort for them.
Okay, for sure.
They have a software system. They update it to the latest standard.
Yeah,
they update it to the latest standards.
Poor company.
The election happens, and and of course they get paid, right? And they release the people with the date, with the end of the election,
mm-hmm.
and of course those people go on immediately and find other jobs.
Probably calling up. There must be like some poor secretary there, like, can you please come back?
Well, the manager I spoke with was actually, they were
very frazzled.
They were under a lot of stress because indeed some of the people were still available, but some of the people aren't.
Oh goodness!
And
that's like
they've got to try and rebuild the teams and get everything set up and working.
Sounds like a nightmare. Like this election, on one hand, I can see it as a good thing, but I see it as a nightmare in so many other ways. Like we talked about beforehand, the garbage, having to hire people. Like, think about it. We probably won't even have a coalition until about November. Like, it's exciting. Election time is always very exciting. It's always like very crazy, and there's so much crazy stuff that's just happened in the last week. But I mean, there's so many negatives because like they hire people or like graphic designers and whatever, and then you let those people go and people move on to other projects, and like you don't expect to rehire those people and be in touch with those people for another like 4 years or whatever.
I think one of the things that surprises us all is they call it a snap election. But even so, it's 4 months, 5 months? 4 months.
Elections are in September.
So it's
about
June,
3
July,
months.
August. No, it's 4 months. And they need that 4 months because they have to do all the things just to operate the election.
And prepare, yeah.
It's not like all the people involved in operating an election are sitting around waiting for an election to happen.
They're moving on to other projects.
So they've all got to be pulled back, and all that money has to be allocated, and budgets have to be paid, and companies have to be hired, and contracts have to be written and signed and agreed, and yeah, it's a big deal. Okay, those were the spot topics of the moment. I think the next interesting one that caught my attention just a short time before we started this podcast was oil tankers blowing up in the Persian Gulf. I don't think we actually...
Spidey senses tingling, Tati?
Well, I think this is one of those fog of war moments, meaning we don't know what happened yet. The initial report was oil tanker hit by torpedo.
Yeah, I know. I read 2 articles on that. Like a torpedo?
Well, torpedoes are normally something you hear launched out of submarines.
That's the whole...
It's not really a submarine area, but you can launch them off of ships also.
Okay, that I didn't know.
Yeah,
cool.
You can launch them off of destroyers, and other types of ships may fire torpedoes as well. All the word torpedo really means is...
This big giant missile.
Well, it's a missile that runs underwater.
No.
Okay, that's it.
So who do you think did it?
Well...
And what's his name is in Iran right now?
Yeah, the president... The prime minister...
Prime Minister of Japan.
Prime Minister of Japan.
I can't pronounce his name.
It's just Abe.
Oh, Abe. I always thought it's something else.
No.
Abu or something.
No, Abe. Abe.
Sorry? Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, I say fog of war because I mean, the people in the ship know something hit the ship and things blew up.
But the question is, wasn't it like a Norwegian ship or something like that?
Well, I think, again, I say fog of war because one report I read said it was a ship going to Japan, said it was a ship that was registered to the Marshall Islands, which is U.S. territory.
Okay.
That would be kind of a big deal if a U.S. registered or U.S. flagged ship is hit. Now, just because it's registered to the Marshall Islands doesn't mean it's not owned by someone else.
No.
So one of the ships involved, they said, was owned by a Norwegian company, and I think another ship, or maybe that ship, was picking up products for a Japanese company, so that it may be owned
totally,
by...
sounds completely random. I don't know.
Still, if oil tankers are getting hit in the Persian Gulf,
Mm-hmm.
that's a major disruption potentially to world operations. Interestingly, although the U.S. has so much equipment there and has been moving warships there, I had this interesting thought that was, but why do they care?
Well, I think that Trump and Iran have been having this interesting interaction.
Well, yeah, but again, one of the other side of Trump's positions is the U.S. should care where it cares and shouldn't where it doesn't. Meaning, if the U.S. doesn't have what they call a vital interest, so the vital interest used to be that up to 40% or half of the oil in the U.S. was
came from
coming.
Iran?
Well, no, not from Iran. Came out of Saudi Arabia, Kuwait,
Qatar.
and yeah, those areas, those countries. I
Okay.
think mostly Saudi Arabia and Kuwait.
Okay.
And all that oil passes down this little narrow area, which on one side it's either Saudi Arabia or Bahrain, and on the other side is Iran.
But they're not getting their oil from
that's the straits
that
they always
area.
talk about.
I mean,
but with fracking, the U.S. is now producing all of its own oil, and
so why would this make top headline news?
And has even begun to export oil. Well, Japan imports over 95% of its oil.
From Iran?
They import over 95% of the oil, and I think 80%, something like 80% of that, I don't know about that, how accurate that number is, comes from the Persian Gulf.
From Saudi Arabia.
Comes from various countries. Japan does import, or they used to import from Iran.
Okay, but they stopped due to sanctions?
And also from these other countries. I don't know if they stopped due to sanctions or not. Okay, many countries in Europe were importing from Iran, and the other countries, Iraq and Saudi Arabia and so forth. So much of the world gets its oil. I know India imports a major portion of its oil also from these countries. That's one of the reasons that India has traditionally stood against Israel in the UN, because they don't want to upset the Arabs, which are providing most of their energy needs. That changed, by the way, also yesterday. There's that
I didn't read yet.
The new, I say new, but the re-elected government of India, Modi.
Oh, sorry. I sometimes I do not connect these names in my brain. It's not that I don't know them, or
So there was some vote in the U.S. Some vote in the UN, and for the first time ever, India, instead of abstaining or voting with the Arabs, actually voted with Israel, and that was considered a very big deal. Apparently, now that he has had a much more successful election and has a major support in his country, he feels more comfortable changing how he supports things around the world. But, so why the U.S. would get involved, I'm not sure.
Listen, I'm always that person that says we don't see the full picture, and there's always things going on behind the scenes that we don't see. But I think that the Trump-Iran interaction has caused, I'm not going to say a rift, because the rift already exists, but severe tensions, we've had them for the past month or whatever. Listen, Trump's not going to be bullied.
So if a U.S.-flagged oil tanker was struck by a torpedo from Iran...
What if it wasn't from Iran?
Well, there's other interesting possibilities. There are. For example, the crazies in Yemen, who do get their arms from Iran, They may have fired it. You can drop a torpedo off a little boat. Okay, you drop it in the water.
But do they have those capabilities? Like, come on.
They, at least one report says they hit Saudi Arabia.
Because, like, listen, hearing about them like hit airports in Saudi Arabia, like rockets, kind of like we get from Gaza.
Well, they said
that sounds reasonable.
The last report I read said they hit Saudi Arabia with a cruise missile.
What the heck?
So this is
wow.
This is high tech programmable equipment. You need appropriate launchers. You need somebody to set appropriate coordinates and so forth.
High-tech war jobs.
High-tech war jobs.
Anywho's, the only thing I can come up with conspiracy theory-wise is it's from Saudi Arabia, because Iran pissed them off like a month ago. Like didn't Iran blow up like 2 of its tankers, or
these were not,
like attack 2 of its ships or something like that?
Well, you say Iran, again, this is a number of ships were sabotaged. There wasn't necessarily direct evidence announced publicly.
So what if they have evidence that isn't public?
So what, you're saying Saudi Arabia blew up this tanker?
No, I'm saying that Iran, it's a possibility.
Well, that would be what they call a false flag operation, meaning you attack yourself to say it was your enemy. Which is also possible.
But what would that accomplish?
What would
it accomplish? Like, forget the Secret Service type
level. If you want
on a public level.
If you wanted to get the U.S. to attack your enemy for you, you attack the U.S. making it look like it was your enemy.
But isn't the United States currently with Saudi Arabia on good terms? I mean, Trump visited Saudi Arabia. Kushner's been there quite a few times. Generally
speaking, the public appearance has been that the U.S. and the Saudis have been getting along very well. We certainly saw that physically with President Bush. We saw that with President Obama, and we've also seen that with Trump. They seem to have a reasonable deal worked out, even when there was the crazy story of the Saudis killing one of their citizens who was in Turkey.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And apparently horrifically killing him.
Kelloggy. It always reminds me of Kellogg's cereal.
Apparently horrifically killing him.
Mm-hmm.
But it was summarily ignored by the United States. So that's
conspiracy. Like I said, spidey senses tingling.
Well, there's things going on there. We don't see it.
But are there news articles, and I'm sure there are, that don't get so much attention where the truth does come out? I'm not talking about dark web. I'm talking big websites where someone gets a good scoop of a story. It's not going to become the big story. It's going to go so under the radar.
Nowadays, I would say, first of all, it's impossible to tell. You've got so many conspiracy theorists, and you have so many fake news operations that even if the real stuff was coming out, you wouldn't be able to tell one from the other. The other thing that's happening is most of the major news organizations have basically abandoned reporting.
What does that mean, they've abandoned reporting?
Well, first of all, if you go to the front page of most newspapers today, you certainly see this in Israel, and I now see this showing up all over the United States. You don't see opinion pieces on the back of the newspaper. They're putting them on the front page, which means I think this, not here's a story, but
basically they have nothing to report.
I
know. Orange man bad.
Orange man bad. But so they're trying to tell you what to think instead of trying to tell you what's happening.
Okay.
The second thing is reporting costs a lot of money. Let me take a practical example. We're here in Israel, right? Israel's a hard place to understand. You don't arrive here as an American. I'm going to give a real simple example. This is an example I give Americans and sometimes Israelis to give a perspective. You're in America.
Yeah.
Okay. I lived in New Jersey.
Yeah.
And I had to take a trip to the middle of Pennsylvania for work.
Okay.
So I got in my car and I drove for 5 hours.
That's like driving to Tzfat. More than
no,
Tzfat.
That's right. That's like driving. No, it's keep going. That's like driving from here to Lebanon.
Okay.
Okay. So, or further it might be from here to the edge of Turkey, if there was an actual highway that went straight, because I drove a nice straight highway.
Yeah.
Right. I get not straight, but up and down the mountains or whatever. But And I say, we drove when you were a child from New York to Florida.
Okay, yeah, that I remember.
Okay.
That was like 20 hours.
22 hours of straight driving. We drove through.
You remember my shoe melted on the windshield?
Yeah. 22 hours of straight driving.
Mm-hmm.
Various pit stops and so forth. But if you look at it, and you'd say to an American, I drove from New York to Florida. They go, oh, okay. Or I drove, when I was a kid, we drove from Pennsylvania to California.
Okay.
Okay. That's
like
maybe 3 days straight through, 5 days if you make appropriate stops and so forth. You don't want to drive overnight. And then you say that to an Israeli, and they're like, what in the world are you talking about? If I drove 5 days from Israel, it would be from Israel to Berlin.
But there's no straight.
It's,
okay. You mean like if there were roads and whatever.
Listen, driving in America is amazing because in the 30s, 40s, 50s, I don't remember my history very well, they built a interstate highway system.
Okay.
So there are big wide roads equivalent to the Ayalon here in Israel.
Okay.
3-4 lanes that cover the whole country.
Okay.
From almost every major city to every major city.
Yeah.
Of course, you talk to Americans nowadays and they'll say the traffic's still horrible, the roads are terrible, they're not always taken care of, and then roads aren't wide enough. I mean, if you do it in California, they've got 12 lanes and they're all full.
Okay.
But regardless, assume they weren't, assume you can drive straight, it's smooth sailing. So if we assume you had those same kind of roads, you don't. But if we drove straight, you could drive a tremendous distance.
Okay.
Israelis, in Israel, the maximum driving range is about 3 hours.
That's true, yeah. 3 hours drop in spot. 3 hours.
Now, I'm not talking about, okay, you can go to the very tip in Eilat, and there's a few other examples. But basically, the whole the whole Route 6 is 2 hours, 2.5 hours. That's it. That's from Beersheba up to Nahariya.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? That's it. That's as far as you can go. So I say to people, for example, you have Bethlehem.
Yeah.
It's Palestinian territory.
Oh, God, don't please start that.
Okay. And you're in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
So you go to the Kotel, the Western Wall.
No.
Or you go to the center of Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're going to drive from the Western Wall to Bethlehem. And if you
25 minutes, maximum 35.
Much less. I've driven it. If you
I've been okay. I take buses. Okay,
no traffic. If you say
20 minutes.
If you say to an American, 10 minutes. I've driven it.
When no traffic.
No traffic.
Yes,
10 minutes. Derech Hebron, 10 minutes. Okay, Kotel to Kever Rachel, 12 minutes. It was exactly 12 minutes. Okay?
From the Kotel.
Yes. And you say that, okay, we're going to drive from one country to another in 12 minutes. Because the Americans are like, land for peace. You go, 12 minutes. Why are we worried about rockets? 12 minutes. But if you say to an American how far away it is, they will always measure it mentally about how far away the next state is. So if you're in New Jersey, how far away is Pennsylvania? 2 or 3 hours. How far away is New York if you're in the middle of New Jersey? I think that's a 4-hour drive.
Right? You're talking like from
the length of the drive, the length of New Jersey is like a 4-hour drive.
Okay.
So you say to America, how far away? Wow, 4 or 5 hours. It's 500 miles, 1,000 miles. No, it's 15.
Okay.
Okay, that's it. That perspective requires you to have people here, and they can't just arrive for a week. Like every time there's a war in Gaza, you see a horde of reporters arrive, right? It's like plane load after plane load of reporters. You go to the border, and there's rows and rows of guys with cameras.
Mm-hmm.
Because all the reporters arrive. But where are the local reporters? I don't mean the Israeli reporters. What I mean is the international, the news organizations that considered themselves large. ABC, NBC, CBS in the United States, New York Times, Wall Street Journal. These were big news organizations.
They're dying.
They had 1,000 reporters.
Like I said, they're dying.
Right. So they had Israel offices. And in the Israel office, they would take one of their reporters from the U.S. and they would send him here for 6 months. And while he's here for 6 months, first of all, he would meet some of the politicians, he would meet some of the government officials, he would meet some of the local people, and he would get some perspective. And so while he's an American, and he would have the American perspective in his reporting, he would be able to give some of the local context. Those people are gone.
I think that, social media has changed perspective. Like, if I take a picture and put it up on Instagram or use, Snapchat or whatever, instead you get people in their real experiences. Like, for example, like you were talking about Gaza, there's this Instagram account, and they document every time. They document what life is like there. Like last night, there was actually a rocket attack on a yeshivot that came in from Gaza, and she's the people that run the account quaking in their bomb shelters. There's no need for those anymore unless people are not trusting of them and they're not making their money from it anymore.
There's still a lot of people that are listening to those sources, but those sources have less and less direct information, which also means they sometimes are doing their reporting. Yes, they're listening to that tweet, and then they're listening to taking something from somebody in Gaza, and they're applying that from their best perspective sitting in New York or Washington.
So they're
DC.
Not here anymore. They're relying on the people living.
But not only are they not here,
they don't have a concept of.
They have no concept. They have no context. And like I said, you may think how far away, and you think many, many hours, and it's minutes or seconds away. You may think these things are big. Big protests, and they may be hundreds. It could be. By the way, this is a particular context. The context in China might be reversed. You might see a protest in China of 100,000 people, and you would say, "What a huge protest!" And they go, "No, that's small, because the city is 20 or 30 million people, and if you don't hit 1 million people, it's not even a real protest, right?" So context matters, and with that context lost, the reports you get are weird. They're out of context.
Skewed.
Very skewed. Very skewed. You also see the reverse, of course. You see there are various sites which are conspiracy theory oriented.
So I'm not one of those conspiracy theorists personally, but
you see weird things come from them because they also take from various sources and don't have context and create interesting mindsets from them. So, oil tankers blow up. Rockets get launched, and the various people in the election system are all attacking each other. It's an interesting time.
Listen, the political attacking each other is I think of something in the washing machine that's when the washing machine is trying to get all the water out of the piece of clothing. That's what it's done to my head. I can't. In Hebrew, there's a word. It's mechufan. Something drives you crazy and ugh.
Well, and so
that's exactly what just happened this week.
So the usual response is get away from the politics. I mean, when it's problematic, get away from it.
No, of course I've taking breaks and I'm not paying attention to it every day, but still
Well, you're involved. You're involved in a particular political party, and that makes a difference. But the system, I don't know. I was going to say the system's wacky, but look at the stuff going on in the U.S. It's it's either attack the president all the time, or now it's election. It's only 2 years, but it's election season. Wow.
How many candidates do they have running against Trump currently?
Well,
I can't just get it down to one.
I don't know if these people are serious, if they actually think they have a chance, or if it's actually a financial thing. It's a way of raising money, because then if their campaign stops, they get to take all the money home.
That's an interesting thought that it's a financial thing. I really think that they do have a chance, but I don't think they're in touch with the people the way Trump.
I think on that note, we'll wind it up and say, have a great Shabbos.
Thank you.
Non-copyrighted podcast ending music. Hi,
Just stop.
hi,
Not Arnold Schwarzenegger.
ay, 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 hopkasack, shitty bitty bitty bitty, hopkasack, shitty bitty bum, hopkasack, shitty bitty bitty bitty, hopkasack, shitty bitty bum, ay, 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 to the die, ay, 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 to the die, ay, to the die, ay, 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 ay.